introduce yourself and share screens, and over to you.
Thank you very much. Yes, I've got a slide that introduces me, so I will share my screen. And hopefully you're now seeing my screen with the title Marketing Planning Before Getting to Social Media.
Yes, we
Brilliant.
are. Thank you.
So Jane and I haven't collaborated on this. Jane will verify we haven't collaborated, but this is almost exactly a longer version of the introduction she gave, because it's definitely focused on marketing planning and the importance of it. Let me start. I will introduce myself. So I moved to the New Forest from rural Somerset 3 months ago. I'm absolutely loving the area. I was in countryside, but now I have the sea on my doorstep and the forest, and it's just glorious here, as you all already know. But it does mean that I'm really keen to get out and about into the business community here, but that's obviously quite strange in the current environment. So I'm happy I can do this virtually, and one day look forward to meeting people in person. So just to give you a little bit of background on me, I sort of grew up in technology for large corporations. I've worked for Canon, Microsoft, Borland is a software company that the techies in our audience might recognize. But I also spent about 8-9 years co-running a small manufacturing business in Somerset. So I have got experience from large global corporations, but I've also run a small business, and so I do know the particular challenges that come with that. There are some similarities, but it's a very different environment. Those of us in small businesses, that's where we do our learning. Big corporates, you learn different things, but the coalface is certainly in small businesses. Along the way, I focused on business management side of things, but also I've got a real interest in personal development. So I'm a practitioner of NLP and a member of the Institute of Leadership and Management and fellow of the Institute of Training and Occupational Learning. And I do quite a lot of training, increasingly online, of course, but also in person. What I'm doing now is working, I'm happy to hear lots of people talking about multiple identities, and I certainly have multiple identities in my professional world. I work with a company called New Journey Marketing. We do marketing and business planning, and actually our customer base is entirely in Europe. We don't, not necessarily by design, but our wins have been in mainland Europe rather than in the United Kingdom, most predominantly in northern Italy, and that obviously changed quite dramatically at the beginning of the year. But I also work with international trade matters and export and import, and we provide the international trade training for a number of chambers of commerce in the southwest. So that's another area I work in, and I'm also on the team at Boardroom Advisors, and we put people like me with different areas of specialism into boardrooms, into companies that need to bolster their directors. They need to look at things like employee ownership trusts, or really just getting their organizations functioning well and bring in external expertise for that. Behind or in front, not sure which of all of that, is my own company, which is Crystal Planning. And I will work with companies directly on planning for their business, marketing planning, international trade planning, and general business planning. I do have spare time, and so I'll just add that in that spare time, I'm a volunteer leader and management trainer for the Scout Association, and just in the process of integrating into Scouts in my new neck of the woods, rather than in Somerset, which I'm leaving, but still doing that online because we're not doing too much face-to-face scouting at the moment, but it is resuming happily. So let me just start with a word about planning. I'm kind of all about planning. It is a way to get to doing the right thing. So I do focus on implementation as well as planning for that implementation. But this is a great quote from Alice in Wonderland, where she says to the Cheshire Cat, "Which way shall I go?" And the Cheshire Cat just says, "Well, it depends on where you want to go." And because she's wants to go somewhere but is not entirely clear where, the Cheshire Cat quite rightly advises, well, just keep walking, you'll get somewhere. But actually, of course, we all know that keeping doing business is very easy and very tempting to fall back on, but without a plan and without an objective to achieve, then you'll achieve something, but it may not be what you set out to achieve. So the importance of understanding what you're trying to achieve is absolutely critical. And never more so than when you look at things like social media or marketing. So my title for today is all about the things you should do before you get to social media. But I will say up front, I think I'm a huge advocate of social media. I have children and they have grown up with social media. And of course, we're all aware of the potential risks and dangers that go with social media. But personally, I completely embraced it. I've come from a technology background, so I guess that was inevitable. But what I did with my children is I taught them how to use it properly. So if we cast our mind back to the invention of the motor car, and funny enough, I saw this very thing featured at the National Motor Museum in Beaulieu when I went along there a few weeks ago. When cars were first invented, a chap walked at the front with a red flag warning everybody that this scary thing was behind him. That would curtail the effectiveness of this new invention, and so the cars had to go more slowly. I would much rather take away that red flag, let these new inventions like social media really help us achieve their potential, but of course do so in a way that's safe and appropriate for everything. So my presentation is designed to get more social media done and get the right social media done. It's certainly not a cautionary tale in social media being a bad thing. So I don't think like that at all. But, I think it was Jane that made the remark, how many times do people start with the social media and think they need to be on Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever, and then try and work back a strategy from there? So that's really the theme of what I've got here is don't start with social media. You need to have a proper plan. And this whole discussion has come out of what I've seen at customers. So I have been working with clients who've said, I had a client who came to me and said, you know, come and help us. We've got to do digital marketing. We've got to do. And when I started working with them, they had Pinterest and LinkedIn and Facebook and all sorts of things going on. But nobody really knew why. They just knew they should do something. And so this is a really genuine situation that I see. And when I saw that type of thing and variants on that 2 or 3 times, I thought, you know, there's a piece of education here, which is social media is potentially fantastic, but only in the context of a proper plan. And so that led to initially a blog and then eventually to this presentation and these kind of discussions around it. So absolutely, social media might be the thing for a particular business, but I find it most effective to not start there, but actually to start with a proper plan. And also to remember that social media is just one marketing, let's call it vehicle. You might call it one marketing tool, one marketing activity you could engage in. But there are many marketing vehicles. There are physical things like brochures and flyers. You can see my business card there. And then there are the things that you put up around your premises if you have them. So feather flags, A-frames, even just your physical shop window. And if you don't have a physical presence, a physical shop window, then your shop window on the world is your website. And so we've got to remember to get all of those things right, as well as the social media. I've certainly seen companies where they were investing a lot in beautiful catalogs. They were a manufacturer, they were doing a lot of that great website, but as you drove up to their premises, which many of their customers did, not to buy products, but to come and see how the products were manufactured and how the technology worked, it was messy. the car park wasn't signposted. It wasn't a great experience. So again, this approach to social media could be great, but don't do that at the expense of all of the other things that your customers and your potential customers interact with. So you do need a marketing plan, or at least you need some marketing planning. And I find these days business planning and marketing planning take many different forms. Gone are the days where you had to have a business plan, and then you wrote it and you spent hours and hours on it, and then you put it in a file and put it on a shelf and never looked at it again. I work with companies with much more of a fluid business planning approach. And of course, there are times when you need a business plan to show to, if you're raising money, if you're applying for grants, there will be people, stakeholders that need to see your business plan. But actually that's only needed if you need someone who wants a physical document. But actually planning your business is absolutely critical, because you've got to know what you're aiming for and how you're going to get to that place. And marketing planning is the same. It's not often that a finance company will ask for a marketing plan specifically. They tend to want the overall business plan, but there's probably, or there should be, a marketing section within that. So whatever your requirement for planning, you need to make sure you've got an overall corporate business plan in place, and then you can use that to inform your marketing planning. And I've got a diagram in a few minutes which shows where all of that sort of fits. So I have a slide here on how to do marketing planning. Every one of us on this call that is in the communications business, and there's 2 or 3 of us, will have their own approach to it. And this is certainly not a masterclass in how to write a marketing plan. We have 20 minutes, and I intentionally put this into the context of how does marketing planning fit with planning social media. So this is just a framework, and it would be applied in different ways in different organizations. So I always start with the companies that I work with by asking them to define their product or solution or service, and what value that brings. And I have a module in my training which is about defining a value proposition. And it surprises me almost every time how I work with often extremely successful companies, but if you just ask them to give you 1 or 2 sentences on exactly what the value of their product is, they really, really struggle. And then I find that if you can get somebody in the organization to do that, then the other people in the organization, they're not sure. They can't capture it into a single sentence. So it's quite a often enlightening exercise to get a company owner or team to just step back and say, no, what exactly do you do? What exactly do you sell, and why is it good? So if you haven't done that recently, just step back, but also make sure all of the people that work for you and are promoting your products for you understand exactly what your product or solution is and why it's valuable. And then once you know what you're selling, then you need to know who you're selling it to. And Jane quite rightly made the point, if you don't know who your customers are, you don't know who your customers, how your customers behave, what their needs are, what their challenges are that you can help with, then it's very difficult for you to decide how to talk to them. So do research of your market and think about who your customers are and what it is that you can help them with. Are you selling something to make things better? Are you selling something to fix a problem? Just understand from the customer's point of view why your offering might be valuable to them, why they would choose yours as opposed to somebody else's. And then I'm all about goals and objectives, and I'll give you a great example of this from when I was living in Somerset. So I have a dog, and I needed a dog walker, and she was a lovely lady. The dog loved her completely. sometimes more than me, I think. But we had a conversation because she said, oh, what do you do? And she said, oh, do you know, she said, I'd love to set objectives for my business, but I don't know what I'm trying to do. And I said to her, well, I think you know instinctively more than you realise, because here we are in a little village in the sort of top half of Somerset. You're not trying to attract customers with dogs from the whole of the Somerset County, are you? Because that would just be bonkers. You'd be driving for an hour to get to your customer. And she said, no, I hadn't thought about that. Of course, I only want them in this particular radius. And so just by really defining that her goal was to attract customers from within a particular mile radius of her house, really focused her in on what communities to talk to, who she wanted to talk to, and also when somebody inquired from further afield, she really stopped to think about whether that was possible. And in her case, she did have 1 or 2 customers who'd moved but wanted to hold on to her. So she put certain provisions in place and said, well, yes, I will come and walk your dog, but there's a different price, because if I'm driving 15 miles instead of 2 or 3 miles down the road, that has cost implications to my business. So it's one specific example, and of course all our businesses are different, but it's really important to understand what you're trying to achieve. And if she did decide on conquering the whole of Somerset, she probably needed a different business model to do it, and who knows, she may franchise her business, but certainly her working on her own, that wasn't a sensible thing to be aiming for, so stop aiming for it. And then once you have defined what are you selling, who are you selling it to, and exactly what goals and objectives you have, then you can start thinking about deciding on your communications plan. And think back to that previous slide, your communications might include a shop front, it might include an A-frame outside your premises. There is a lot of things in communications beyond just social media and beyond even just websites. And then of course you will implement your plan once you've defined your marketing plan. And then probably the most important step of all is not to put it on the shelf and then dust it off just a year later, but actually look at what's happening, refine what's happening, measure it, reassess it, and then go through that cycle. So planning is a circular activity. You don't start at the beginning and then find your document and then stop. Planning is something that should be going on within businesses all the time. That manifests itself perhaps in things like quarterly reviews, or having the discipline once a month to say, right, what am I achieving this month based on the plan? So it comes out in different ways, but it's definitely an ongoing process. And with something like marketing that can be measured hourly, daily, and certainly needs to be measured regularly, then that assessment and refinement needs to be taking place all the time. So it's all a very, very fluid process. But going back to our theme here, which is about where does social media come in? Social media doesn't come in until you get to the communications plan. So you have to have defined what you're selling, who you're selling it to, what their needs and pain points, challenges are that you can help with. Then decide on what you're going to achieve. And only at that point can you decide on your communications plan. And the social media aspect of your communications is one tiny aspect of that. So let me share what I mean by that. So this is a slightly complicated diagram, but I'll walk you through it. And if you're a large corporate, you're going to have lots of things going on in all these different boxes. If you're a small business, my own business, I can share this in a single page. So the complexity of this really depends on the size of your business, but the structure is the same. So you start off with a company, and a company has a corporate plan, and it has goals and objectives, and many of those, and perhaps in a profit-making organization, one of the most important goals is revenue and profitability. But companies also have plans around how they might want to build their reputation, how they may want to expand. So there are things outside of just sales. Within that corporate plan, there is a marketing element. And marketing is more than just communications. It's brand management. It is the tools that you need to carry out those communications, be those electronic, newsletters, websites, or physical, brochures, business cards, posters, those types of materials. And in marketing planning, you're going to also be thinking about your sales channels. And we've already seen dramatic shifts in sales channels in the last 6 months, where small businesses that have traditionally been storefronts have switched to selling online. And in fact, even the very biggest retailers in our country and many others have seen their shift to different sales channels. And if they didn't have a digital e-commerce side of things at the beginning of the last 6 months, they almost certainly have now, or they have to look at their viability for the future, because the world's, as I say to my children, somebody's tipped up the plan and emptied it all out on the floor, and now we've got to do it again. So we're in a very, very different world. And then within communications, you have online or digital communication. So that's everything you can't touch. And I don't count touching a computer screen. So it's your website, social media, email, newsletters. But you also have offline or direct to customer activities, and that's your storefront. Back in the day, it used to be events. They will come back to us in the future. So there are all of those sorts of activities that we're undertaking as well. And so again, just to put it into context for you, social media is just that tiny, tiny little box there. And I think that slide, which I know is a bit corporate and a bit complicated, but that kind of brings together the theme that I've got here, is that social media is fantastic for many organizations and definitely should be embraced if it's suitable for you. But make sure that you look at it in the context of your overall corporate and marketing plan. It is very tempting to dive straight into social media because it's literally at our fingertips. You know, like everybody, my phone is the first thing I reach in the morning. It's what I use for my alarm clock, for my camera, for reminders, and I can be connected to my friends and family through social media. So it's just there in our hands the whole time. But as you look at marketing your business, there are other things to take into account. Because it's so close, and because we see opportunities to do social media very cost effectively and often free, it is extremely tempting to jump all over social media. But as you do that, I would say, think about the amount of time you spend managing your social media, because although the social media might be free, your time definitely isn't. And so there is a cost, and it's all about making sure that investment, whether it's time or money, is going in the right places. So wrapping up, and that's the slide that sort of puts the whole thing into context for you. Common questions, only 2 here. Do I need a website? Well, the answer to that is it depends on what your potential customers are going to want to see. As I mentioned, I'm a dog owner, so I don't mind if my dog walker doesn't have a website, because personally that's about finding them on social media and then working with them. I don't care whether they have a corporate website or not. But when it comes to kennels and putting my dog somewhere to stay for a night or 2, well, personally that feels a little bit more important. For me, I would feel more comfortable with a website. I can go and see about their licensing and what provision they have for healthcare and that kind of thing. So do you need a website? You don't know till you know what your customers will be expecting. And then the other question is, should I be on and, you know, insert the social media platform of your choice, Facebook, LinkedIn, Pinterest, and so on. And again, the answer to that depends on who your potential customers are and where they, to use a phrase, where they hang out. And you need to get some thought into this and to talk to digital experts, because I'll give you a generalism. Facebook is generally considered to be a consumer platform, so it's used by individuals in their sort of consumer personal lives, whereas LinkedIn is considered to be used by business people, so people in their business lives. But I know that there are a huge number of business groups on Facebook, so where individual business owners or owners of smaller businesses are coming together with a common theme, perhaps their industry they're in, and lots of networking groups. So the lines are quite blurred, and if you're not sure about this, that's definitely where a digital marketing expert is going to be able to help you. And so what those two questions illustrate for me is that unless you understand your product and your service and your target customers and your goals, which is all part of planning, you can't possibly embark on the right social media because you wouldn't know which ones to choose. And so just a final quick slide. I'm all about planning and helping businesses because when they've got a plan, they know exactly where they're going for, they know what the end goal is. But I am very, very aware and reminded virtually every single day that that's what the plan looks like, but that's what reality looks like. And so everything I do with my clients does recognize that reality is never quite what you set it out to be, but it's okay because you've still got the target at the end and you can still work towards that. And that's the real world we all live in. I'm sure we'll all agree. So thank you very much for the opportunity to talk to you. I really look forward to the opportunity to meeting in person. I'm sure there's folks on this call where I could connect with individually and that we could potentially work. And I'm loving being in the New Forest geographically. I'm sure I'm going to be loving being in the business community here as well. So Matthew, thank you.
Thank you very much indeed, Frances. So given that we started a bit late, we've got, say, 10 minutes if anyone's got any quick points, but we can pick these issues up in future calls as well. But Frances, if you can stop sharing for a minute and then we can all see each other. Thank you.
Okay.
Remember everyone that this is recorded and is available on the NFBP website sometime within the next 24 hours. Phil.
You're on mute.
I've got to do better next time. I say I'm not sure if this is a question or not. I'm still sort of formulating it. But if you're running a business like in my business, I'm offering the same thing all the time. It's software tech support for Apple Mac computers. I've been advised over the past to have social media pages and update them because that gets more views and Google apparently recognises the page more and links to your website and so on. But what do you recommend for a company like mine where there's very little that changes? All I can really do is post a social media hi, or there's nothing new. It's always just the same basic tech support. Would you recommend having those pages and just doing sort of minimal updates just to get your name out there, or? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
I'm not quite sure what the question is. I'm just not quite sure where to go with these things.
Well, and I'm so mindful of the fact there's a lot of people on this call that could probably answer that, but I'm fortunate to be sitting in the chair, so I'll answer it. Your business or your offerings may be static, but your customer audience is not. And if you think of the many hundreds and thousands and millions of businesses that are out there that are all lobbying to get in front of us on social media, you haven't saturated the market with your messages by any stretch of the imagination. So examples of how to keep putting messages out there is to take a piece of information. So if I take the presentation that I've done today, I could post about the importance of planning. I could post about the challenges of planning. So that last picture I had where I had a plan, but then the plan goes wrong, and everybody can relate to that. So what appears to be to you a static piece of information could still be shared in multiple times. And the reason for sharing it in many different ways and repeatedly in the context of a plan is that you will reach people, you will reach different people. And if it's targeted right, each of those different people could be a potential customer. And the World Wide Web is an incredibly crowded, noisy, busy place. So I think a lot of people think if they've said it, they've said it. Well, yes, but only to the half dozen that you reached. So keep saying it. And also even, and now I'm going back to general marketing basics, even the half dozen you reached have forgotten by next week because they've been bombarded with a number of other messages. So the other thing you want to keep repeating is you'll then get them at a time when they need you. So you're just never done. And that's not just a social media thing, that's a marketing thing. You're never done, and you may feel static in your product offerings, but your potential audience of customers is the biggest crowd in the world, constantly moving. And so there's always a new person to hear your messages.
So would you say it's okay to publish the same message effectively on each of those, Facebook or LinkedIn or whatever? Or do you need something new on each individual site?
Yes, I tend to like themes, but I will post the same message on multiple platforms, but then next week I would have a different theme, but it may only be slightly different. But yes, certainly you can't assume that your Facebook audience is also on LinkedIn, because there may be some overlap, but there's likely to be a whole different bunch of people that you reach. Thank you, Frances. Thank you.
I think Vicky had a reaction to that.
Yeah, I just wanted to add, so to follow Frances's illustration that she used in her presentation, her dog walker. So if her dog walker is posting on social media, probably what she's doing is posting about the different dogs that she takes on the lovely walks that they go on. She's still doing dog walking every day, but for a person that's using a dog walker, I want to see that they're going on nice dog walks and they're happy and they're enjoying themselves. So that reassurance. So for you, for example, you could illustrate your knowledge and your experience by talking about certain cases that you've solved. In the generality, you don't want to give away your intellectual property, obviously, but every case that you solve is a mini story for social media. Every new software update from iOS is a mini story for you on social media. So it's just about uncovering where your source of information is that's going to illustrate that you're a knowledge expert in your area and that you know what you're talking about.
Yeah. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you. Samantha, talking of dog walkers.
Yeah, you must have seen mine. She heard the word dog and thought she'd join in. No, I also wanted to say, Phil, is that I think social media is also about you. And I've learned this a lot in lockdown, is that it's, our businesses are us. We are very different. I'm very different to the next interior designer. He's very different to the next one. It's all about who you are, and people connect with you on social media. So not only what you're posting about differentiates you, it's you. So, I may use somebody else to fix my Mac when it's not working, but if I kind of relate to you and you make me laugh or something, you've said something and I go, oh yes, Phil, then it's you, isn't it, that's reminded me. And just also to just point out about the different social media platforms, I find that with what I do, I have very different approaches to the different platforms. So LinkedIn would definitely be very different and much more commercial and corporate, the way I approach those posts, than to what I put on Facebook. And then likewise, Instagram is very much image based and not so content based, because it can't be. But for me, LinkedIn is a very big platform that I need to increase my presence on, and it's a massive platform. But just think about which ones you pick as well that are relevant to your business.
Sure. Okay, Samantha, thank you.
I think Sandeep had his hand up there.
Yeah, I think the message is, I think Frances is saying, is that your drip, drip, drip effect of repeating, etc., needs to be followed up. And then you take that message forward, etc. But as I do a lot of the traditional business planning and financial planning. The one comment I've made on the chat is that they're all dependent on each other. One can't do without the other. As a business goes forward, as Frances put it, it's fluid. It's got to be adaptable. It's got to change as the business goes through its life cycle. So these things must constantly be kept in mind by the business owners on where they're taking it, what their overall objective is, because as we found out in the last 7 months, the circumstances has completely changed, and it's how do you adapt to those changing circumstances, and have you got the contingencies in place to enable you to change? So that's all part of planning, and I guess it's more about scenario planning and mapping to see where you could end up, to make sure that there are nice surprises or nasty surprises. So you've got to bear that in mind.
Yeah, thanks, Sandeep. And it would be great one day to have a call or a training session about business plans where people don't go back to that traditional idea that it's something you write and file and never return to. I mean, that is still the way it is, but it shouldn't be. Of course, it's an evolving organic document that people are working with all the time. Hence the need for ongoing training and support, which is being provided in great measure today. Frances, you've got us thinking, which is great, and thank you for that. I'm sure people will go back and look at the slides and the recording later and just sort of absorb some of that as we move towards October's sessions. And just to highlight what they are, in the first session, in the first week of October, Rebecca from Purple Dog's going to explore, well, she's called it preparing for the unexpected. And of course, that seems so appropriate this year. And just looking at the way, again, you may have a plan and an idea, but what if suddenly, a pandemic comes along? And so dealing with the unpredictable. And so you're not just religiously following your plan and your pattern. And then the following week, she's going to move on to engagement and how we can sort of step up your engagement with customers and colleagues and whoever you are trying to engage with, and particularly in terms of turning likes into leads, which is a very important theme. And then finally, she's going to delve into the murky world of actually spending money on social media, which is the whole ads thing. And which is better? Should you have an Instagram ad or a Facebook ad and so on? You've probably all spent £7 on a Facebook ad and so on. So she'll explore some of that so you get a bit more mileage for your money. So it's going to be a really useful social media course this year that isn't the traditional one where we sort of go through a particular platform, but I feel that given the current circumstances and situation that it should be really useful for people. So keep an eye out for those. Because these are being delivered professionally, and I mean, all of these things are, but I mean, this is a training course. This isn't the business support hour. This is a training course that happens, and full details will be on our website very shortly. So have a look out for that. But next week we return and we're looking at Google My Business. So a lot of people have spotted over there on a Google search for your business, there's something over on the right-hand side about you. And not everyone is sure about what it is and what you can do about it, but it's quite good to know what you can do about it. And Sam Sutton's going to return next week to take you into the murky world of Google My Business. But Frances, thank you for your time today. And I'm sure there'll be other opportunities. So the good thing about the Business Support Hour is it happens every week. So there are at least 50 slots a year to fill. And so if anyone has a presentation in them, please do just ping me an email. We're booked up now for a few weeks ahead, but there's always a gap for anyone who'd like to share or develop a point further. So please do just volunteer. Everyone's pretty friendly here and very, very, very appreciative of this hour of support, or an hour and 6 minutes in today's case. But that was all down to technology at the beginning. I promise one of us will send you an email next week and tell you how to find us. And we're working on a system such that when you do book, you'll get the Zoom link automatically. But thank you for your time today. The rain stopped, the sun is shining. Enjoy the rest of today. And we'll see some of you in Google My Business next week. Thank you.
See you. Bye.
Bye.